Hi, this is Brennan Davis from Bedrock Games and the Bedrock blog, and I'm here with Lady Chow Fung and Kenny, and we're here for another episode of Wuxia Weekend to talk about The Heroic Ones, a 1970 film directed by Chang Cheh. This is the story of 13 brothers and generals who serve under Li Qiyong during the Tang Dynasty. It's kind of a sort of historical war film rather than the more adventure driven wuxia that we tend to do here. So before we get into the plot and all that stuff, what do you guys think of this film after having seen it?
I really enjoyed it. I mean, I feel like there was a little bit of pacing issues at times. Sometimes there wasn't, yeah, there was a bit of a too long of a lull, and then sometimes things were a bit too hectic, it felt like. But overall, I enjoyed the movie. It was a visual treat, I think. There's one issue I had was that there were too many characters, but I guess really the relevant ones weren't there weren't too many of them. But when they sort of introduce them in the beginning, and you have the music, and like each of one of the 13 generals gets like a pose moment and their name on the screen, it's like, oh my god, do I have to remember all of these characters? And yeah, that sort of like it stalled me a bit in the beginning. It's like, oh god, I'm not sure how much. Yeah, it was a bit of a turn-off when I saw how many characters there were, but as I watched the movie, you realize that most of them aren't really relevant, and that wasn't that big of an issue.
I enjoyed the movie. This is like my third or fourth time seeing it. I did have a problem with the pacing also. I thought it was too slow, especially at the beginning of the movie, and some things could have been, I don't know, for me, could have been left out. And there were too many brothers. I know it's historical and everything, but there were too many brothers at the beginning that, like Kenny said, you think are important, but they end up not really being that important. And it's just, I don't know. I think they could have stuck with one part of the plot and developed it more. But I do like the film because it's very colorful. A lot of it was shot outside. And I love the costuming and the fight scenes.
Yeah, I like this movie. I agree with pretty much everything you guys said. It can be slow at times. Sometimes that's a weakness, and sometimes it's a little bit of a strength because it gives it this just sense of all these things that have gone on over the course of the movie, and it just feels like a really big film. Like there's a big cast, there's lots of individual plot beats, and there's space between them, so it just kind of breathes. But I feel like as a result, it's kind of slow and lumbering at times, and you want to kind of get to the good moments of the film. So another question I had before we get into there's a point I want to get into to talk about, because I don't think I can get further in the discussion if we don't address it. But how did this movie make you guys feel?
Or in the way everything played out.
Just like, what was your emotional reaction to the film overall, or what was the most consistent emotion you found yourself feeling?
Fuck the fourth general and the 12th general, whatever. Pardon my French. There's a lot of it was. I got a lot of negative feelings about the antagonists, which is a good thing. That means that they were portrayed in a way that evoked emotion in people. And it was a bit. It made me reflect on friendship and brotherhood and stuff like that in a little bit. In that while it's both a good motivating factor, it can sometimes also be a shackle. Like towards the ending, there was a lot of unnecessary bloodshed at the end just because they couldn't let go of brotherhood, despite the fact that obviously the people they're chasing down had already given up all semblance of being brothers with them, and it's just like,
It made me feel like I'm glad my family wasn't as dysfunctional as this family. First of all, 13 brothers is going to cause a lot of testosterone going through, and there are obviously going to be rivalries. But yeah, like Kenny said, the ending was a lot of unnecessary bloodshed. I don't think it had to go that far, but jealousy plays a important role in this movie. And it's very unfortunate. You know, I was sad for the youngest brother, but he was kind of arrogant in the movie too. But everybody had their flaws.
Yeah,
there wasn't.
Oh, go ahead.
There wasn't one really particular character that I really, really liked the most out of all of them. It's just that it's sad that it had to end the way it did.
Yeah, I felt like this was like watching a slow motion car wreck where you can see everything that's unfolding and you want it to. It's sort of like kind of like watching a tragedy. Like and I think it's because I might not have had as much of this feeling the first time I saw it, but now that I've seen it a few times and it's I know what happens. You don't want certain things to occur, and they're going to happen no matter what. They just have the force of gravity behind them, and so there's sort of a feeling of, no, this isn't supposed to happen, or no, that don't go there, it's a trap, don't go to that meeting, and all of these things are just going to happen as they need to. So I found myself just kind of, I don't think suspense is the right word, but just wishing things would turn out differently than I know they're going to. But one thing I wanted to talk about, because I always bring it up when I talk about this film, is the scene in the where David Chang's character gets killed. I think that's a pretty notable scene, and I didn't know what you guys' reaction and response to that was.
It's a very traditional method of execution. It sounds a bit cold, but I was just thinking, yes, the traditional death by horses. I don't know what it's called in English, actually. I'm sure that's a term.
I think drawn and quartered is...
Drawn and quartered, yes. But that's usually that hung, and then you're drawn and quartered, right?
Yeah, but they did put a rope around his neck, so I guess,
Yeah, okay, yeah, I can see that, yeah.
I think when it's happening, this is, the fine details aren't as important as the overall.
That's the first thing that struck me about that scene. It was like when they started like tying his arms and legs, and you saw the horses outside. It's like, oh yeah, I know where this is going, and it's not going to be fun for him. Poor David Chang.
Well, it's also the kind of movie where he's the closest thing this film has to a protagonist, and
yes.
and so you just are not, I think the closest thing I can compare it to is Game of Thrones. Do you know what I mean? Where, spoilers if people haven't seen it. Everybody here has seen Game of Thrones, right? Or am I?
No.
Oh, okay. Well, then I can't compare it. But there's a comparable thing in Game of Thrones, and it's just like you're a little bit shocked by it when it happens, and also the graphic nature of it. It's not a it's a really brutal method of execution, and the film, I think, really plays that up, even when it doesn't show exactly what happens. So I don't know. I just thought that was a very sort of disturbing scene, but also really effective.
Yeah,
I love the. Oh God.
The first time I saw it, it was very disturbing and very sad, because David Chang never really ever dies in a movie. And, so it's like the first time that I've ever really seen him die, and to die so tragically and so disturbingly and so completely. There's no coming back from this kind of death. And it, just because the two older brothers were just so, I don't know what the right word is for it, but
dickish.
Yes, well, yeah, that too. David Chang's the youngest brother, and he was obviously favored by the father, and the two oldest didn't want him to be favored. They wanted to be the big guy in charge, and just to take it out on him that way. That's the worst form of hazing I've ever seen. So, yeah, it was really disturbing the first time I saw it. I think cried the first time I saw it. It was just...
It's so disturbing. It's we had this conversation when we talked about the Lukewarm Swordsman that has this very similar scene, except Ti Lung, I think, is the one who gets the treatment in that, where he gets bisected. I think I forget this precise details, but it's really gory, and it just instantly reduces the human body to like meat. And I feel like that's exactly what goes on here, and that it's disturbing because number one, the character is being killed in a horrible way, but also you're kind of being reminded of how fragile a human body can be. Even one that up until that point in the movie seemed invincible. And so I don't know. And also I like the way that they use the tent in the scene, where the tent is kind of getting used in place of, like, you don't actually, like, you see the after effects of it. You see his arms and limbs being dragged away, but you don't actually see them getting ripped out, I think. And if you do, it's not like they focus in on the moment that the arm gets ripped out, but you see the contortions of the tent as it's collapsing, and it kind of suggests all the things that are happening to him. And I
think there's also the tent helps to center the scene there, because there's one like high shot where you get to see the tent in the middle and the blood trails coming out in directions of his limbs, basically. And I thought that was a pretty striking image, which perfectly like captures what happened to him without actually having to show like, I don't know, tendons ripping or actual like spurts of blood or anything. The blood trails and the directions of the blood trails is more than enough to imply all of that.
And he's kind of, one way that they describe his movies is painting with blood, and I think this definitely, it's like literally like he's painting the ground with the blood. Now the other thing I wanted to talk about is, why do they keep letting these two guys off the hook so much? They what is it, the fourth and the 12th brother that are basically the bad guys through the whole movie. I think Kang Chun Lee and Soon Shin. They're sort of relentlessly bad through the whole film, and they come this close to being properly punished by the father, but they're let off the hook, and then they multiple times they end up doing things that are not good for the heroes of the film.
Yeah, and I think another striking part about going back to David Chang's death is that he saved the two people that actually killed him. He was their savior. He's the one who got them off the hook in that one scene with the father. The father was ready to execute him, and he was like, no, don't do it, just give him so many lashes and we'll move on from this. And then, towards the end of the movie, they're like, we don't care that you saved us. We're still going to kill you because we don't like you.
He was responsible for them not being executed. He spoke on their behalf, and then all they give him is resentment and envy and, all kinds of horrible things. And they're not particularly competent either. Like, it would be one thing if they were competent, but they're also shown again and again to be making really bad decisions, both morally and strategically and tactically. It's so that they're really unlikable characters, which I think makes them effective. But you kind of like wonder.
I think it's realistic as well, because in real life, just because you help out someone who hates you a lot doesn't necessarily mean they're going to eventually come around to liking you as well, right? So, it would be nice if they saw the error of their ways after being helped out again and again by the other brothers, right? But this is a case where they obviously just don't give a shit, and and that carries on. Like, they've thrown away something important to them, I think, because at the end fight scene, we said there was lots of unnecessary bloodshed, right? I think as part of the lead up to that is this idea that they have like completely decided to abandon any sense of brotherhood with any of the other people, which is why they can draw and quarter the 13th general, and why they can sneak attack so many of their brothers in the end battle there as well.
Yeah, I mean, they're pretty despicable guys, I think. What did you guys think about the fight choreography overall, and just the fight sequences?
there were times like when it, I don't know, the mass fight scenes were a bit messy. I actually felt like I liked seeing it, but at the same time, a lot of it was just a bit all over the place. If that makes sense, like it's just the fact that everyone's got their little spears and they're like and they're sort of like jabbing and yeah, the what they call the black the army of the 13 generals were, you know, all just sort of like wandering around and slashing things. Just when the mass fight scenes just felt a little bit all over the place for me, but the where it's a bit more one-on-one, I like the fight scenes there.
Like the fight with General Meng and stuff like that.
Yeah.
That's the one I didn't like.
Oh, really? What was it about that one that you didn't like?
I didn't like it because there was too much, I think, flipping and slow-mo during the flipping. I think it drew it out too much for me, and if it had been a more concise, get it done kind of thing, I would have liked it more.
Now, was it the fact that he was like David Chang's character throughout that fight demonstrates a lot of like lightness kung fu, like he's leaping off of the battlements and he's leaping high into there? Was it the fact that he was doing that, or just the fact that he was doing it too much and it was getting in the way of the flow of the fight?
I don't even think it was his lightness skill that was actually the problem. I think it was the way that it was shot, because it seemed like his flips were too slow, like they slowed it down too much for me. I don't know. If it had just been like boom, flip, go on, and kind of like move more quickly, I think I would have liked it better. But it just seemed like it was close up and slow.
Yeah, and I think the fighting in this too, it was very much more in the realm of sort of the old swashbuckle style Shaw Brothers movie. Like, you know, the late, like I think of it as like the late 60s style of fighting, except this is, I think, a little bit more bloody than some of the earlier movies. But the scene I liked was the one on the bridge with T. Lung, where his character makes his last stand. It kind of reminded me a little bit of like the 300 film, you know, especially with him wearing like the red cape, which he wasn't wearing at the start of the battle, but I think his father put on him at the end there. But that whole battle inside, what was it, Bianlong Fortress? That was the one that I really liked.
I can see that they're very impressive fight scenes, but at the same time, I just thought they were a bit too all over the place at times, and
too sprawling. Like everybody was kind of just sort of spilling all over.
Everyone's doing their own thing, and then suddenly maybe that captures the feeling of like a grand melee very well, but.
I see this as like firmly in the like in terms of genre. I see this as like a war movie, like a war movie from any era, even like not just like a historical period film, but like it just feels like a 70s war film to me when I watch it. And so I think that a lot of the setting is kind of the feel like the bat, you know, like just having guys in the background meander sort of adds to that vibe for me, But yeah, I don't know. I thought the action scenes were good. I just I think that I don't know. I didn't quite pick up on what you're referring to there. So I'd have to watch it again to sort of, you know, see how I feel about that.
Yeah. I mean, I like the scenes where, you know, where you had a clear focus on like one person, like the bridge scene you said was good, and I agree, because yeah, you can quite clearly see what's going on, and you know, you can see T Lung there. He is wounded and he's holding, he has a last stand against all these other people, and it's not as random as when there's like multiple people on both sides having a fight. If that makes sense, but that's just me probably.
No, I mean, I think it's a reasonable thing. It definitely has, like, I mean, I do think that the battles involved a lot of people, and there were a lot of extras in the battles. So, I like, but in the scenes where like David Chang was fighting with the spear, tended to focus more on David Chang than the people surrounding him. So, it might be that my eye was drawn to different things. But I don't know. What did you guys think of the comparison? Like comparing this movie to a film like 14 Amazons. That's the one that kind of kept popping in my head, which came later, obviously. But it definitely reminded me of 14 Amazons when I would watch it.
Yeah, I got that feeling too. It's 14 Amazons was definitely the female version, but not as bloody, I guess you would say. Yeah, I can see the comparison. There are 14 women, 13 generals. They're all led by a very strong parental figure. Except for, you don't get all the jealousy and the envy with the women.
Yeah, that's the big difference. Is in that movie they're all kind of cohesive, but it's very similar, like you're saying, and they're raised in a very similar way. They're all raised to sort of the same, the same ideals and the same virtues, and it's just very similar, and it almost feels like 14 Amazons. Well, they had 13 in this one, so we're gonna have 14 in this. It's sort of that. But yeah, I don't know. I just kept thinking of that movie.
It's funny because the stereotype would be that in some old Chinese movies where you have a whole bunch of women, it tends to be more of a catfight thing. Because normally when that happens, it's because it's in the the harem of an emperor or whatever. They're all fighting for power and that sort of thing. So the fact that 14 Amazons had all the women working together, and whereas the 13 men had all the fighting and jealousy, it's a nice bit of subversion there.
Well, and it's interesting too because this movie, like the one of the central themes of it seems to be manliness. Do you know what I mean? Like Chang Cheh always has. Like there's always like a masculinity thing going on, but this one in particular, like at the very start of the movie, like the thing that it seems to be saying is like these guys are all super manly. Do you know what I mean? Like they're just like they're able to drink large quantities. They love fighting. They're good at fighting. One of them is hungover and was drunk the night before and just waking up, and he's able to jump off the battlement and kill a general or capture a general that's terrorizing the gates. And so it's interesting to me that there is that contrast when when so much of the film is sort of that what was it, the staunch masculinity that Chang Cheh always has going on in his films. But I think here it's just really visible.
Amped up to 11, yeah, I think.
Well, there's just like like a Chang Cheh movie, there's always the costumes and there's always like the bare-chested scenes, but this just seemed to have an awful lot more of those moments of like a guy fighting and like hacking his way through enemies, without a shirt on, and then all of these characters who prioritize all of their family loyalties and their duties to the state over all other things. So I don't know. It just seemed like an interesting that in light of some of the differences between that and 14 Amazons.
And the fact that there's tons of horrible death as well, which is, I feel like that's a mark of a Chang Cheh movie, is how horrible some of the people in the movie died.
Well,
yeah, definitely.
Well, it's kind of like death is like an apotheosis. Like you become more heroic by dying in that way. Like the two characters who die are Ti Lung and David Chang, and they both are sort of the big heroes in the movie, I think, compared to most of the other characters, with the possible exception of the father.
Yeah, I mean, Ti Lung's character is basically disemboweled, right? And and it's implied that he shoves it all back in and ties it up with his shirt and carries on fighting. And David Chang's character, was hung, drawn, and quartered. So they all died in pretty gruesome ways.
But yeah, so the other thing about this film too, I think that is maybe easy to miss because there's so much else going on, is the costumes and the decor. I was curious what your thoughts on that were. I mean, it's definitely, again, 14 Amazons was something that I kept thinking back to. I mean, they're 2 years apart, so it's probably not surprising that the costumes bear some similarity. But what do you guys think of the costumes?
I just couldn't help but think that the black army outfit was just so impractical in terms of like everything. Yeah, I thought it was very effective. I mean, I didn't know who the Chartois people were, so I actually looked it up. After the movie, just to have an idea, and it turns out there's some sort of Turkic tribe or whatever. So I was wondering why they were, all dressed very differently, and why everyone was referring to them as barbarians. But it sort of makes sense they were from the outskirts of China or wherever it was, and being dressed in furs and stuff, it did give them a bit of that wild feel, and made them look very different from the warlord and his men, for example.
Yeah, I totally agree with Kenny. I think the costuming really works with this, and I loved Ku Feng's general outfit. I don't know what it was about it. Just made him look really strong. I mean, he's a strong personality anyway, but it just added something to him. And the contrast between the emperor's emissary, whoever comes out and is asking for the help from the family, and then how completely oppositely they're dressed. You can tell one is barbaric or uncivilized compared to the others, and how they do things. But I loved the costuming. I thought it was perfect, and the black outfits just didn't work unless it would have been at night. But there wasn't really much going on at night. But all the other costumes seemed to work.
Yeah, and I think I'm curious what you guys generally feel about costumes in general. I know whenever I get in discussions about costumes online, one of the things that comes up is sort of practical versus dazzling visual effects. And so I would contrast say a Choi Yuen movie where people have the glittery robes versus something maybe more recent like Swordsman or Swordsman 2, where people are in much more plain looking textiles that look like they're probably a little bit more historical. And I'm curious where you guys fall. Do you prefer and I don't know where a movie like this fits. I think it's a little bit more in the pageantry department, but movies that have sort of exotic and glittery costumes or things that are a little bit more rooted in reality.
I don't mind if they're glittery and looking flashy and totally unsuitable for whatever era it's in. It will stand out to me, and I'll always comment on it if it looks a bit, if I think that doesn't look practical at all. That's so uncomfortable. Why did you do that to yourself? I'll always comment on it, but I'm not going to. I don't think it would detract from my enjoyment of the movie just because they happen to be wearing white boots for whatever reason.
Yeah, I agree. I sometimes like the glittery outfits, especially if they're portraying some kind of royal character that needs something more glittery and to stand out more. But I think practical works really well, especially if you're working or doing more things outside than if you're more on a set. Chor Yuen's costumes really go well with his set designs with all the colors and everything, so they kind of bounce off of each other. I wouldn't expect something that colorful like a gold lame outfit out in the middle of a desert somewhere.
Okay, no, that makes sense. Though we did get something like that in 14 Amazons. They were kind of out in sort of these arid regions, and they were almost like gold lame style armor that they were wearing. I used to, when I was a history student, that was always a big deal. Whenever a movie got the costumes right, people, the professors would always comment on it, and they would usually have posters of that movie in their office if they thought that the costuming was historical textiles. And I used to be really into that, and then I kind of shifted in the other direction, I think, because I enjoyed the pageantry of the costumes. And so in a film like this, I was kind of it seemed to kind of do both. Sometimes the costumes felt a little bit like they were at least for the time based on what they thought the stuff might have looked like. It certainly isn't quite in the stratosphere of where Chang Cheh can get with his costume selection, like in some of the later movies. But it also felt really kind of, you know, like it was, they were shooting for really striking colors and things like that. But yeah. So what about? Oh, did somebody want to say something? Oh, I'm sorry. What movie did this, aside from 14 Amazons, did anybody else get kind of a Rave Archer vibe at the start of the movie, where they were opening up and they were introducing character after character? It wasn't in the same way, but
it was very similar. They had, like, you know, upbeat music playing and heroic sounding music, and all of these people on their war horses, and it did sort of feel like the beginning of an epic where you have all of these people and you're going to follow their exploits.
Yeah, I agree. I kind of got a Western-y vibe at the beginning of the movie, with them riding up on their horses and then taking this macho stance, and then their name flashing up. I don't know why I got this Western fit.
Well, the
Western
music
feeling.
The music felt very Western in that moment to me. It had that like rolling Western feel to it.
And the way that they grouped the men when they rode up on the horses to introduce them, you're getting these sets of 3 until you get to the last one, and then the last 3 come one at a time. So you're expecting them to be very central to the whole movie.
I actually didn't notice that. That's pretty interesting. So who are the last 3 that were introduced? Do you remember?
T Long, and then there was, I can't remember the person between him and David Chiang.
Okay, that's notable. That's I definitely didn't pick up on that though, even after.
Yeah, the last 3 that were introduced separately, but they were in groups of 3, except for, I think there was one group of 4.
Okay, I like the way it's introduced. I like sort of the, and again, I wrote down Western cowboy, and it's funny in the dub version so this is available on Amazon for people who might want to watch it, and they have the dub version. I have it on DVD, but for the purpose of this one, I decided to stick with the Prime because I wanted whatever people listening to this were going to get. But I noticed on the dubs, a lot of the, and I don't know if you picked up on this, Dion, but a lot of voice actors seem to be doing their best sort of gruff cowboy voices. Like not like they were doing it with an accent, but everybody sounded like their voices were the product of smoking cigarettes and drinking whiskey.
Yes. And I always have a problem with dubbing because the voices don't ever, to me, sound like they should be coming out of that person. Yeah. And so to use these rough kind of cowboy voices just was really off, and that's part of why I guess I got that vibe.
Yeah, no,
like they've been smoking packs of cigarettes.
Yeah, it was like they were smoking unfiltered cigarettes, and they were just really gravelly, like rough voices. Especially, and it seemed like either the tougher you were or the more evil you were, the more raspy and gruff your voice. Like the I think brother number 4 or general number 4 was the had the most gravelly voice out of anybody on the dub. But yeah, I don't know. I kind of this was a time when I was actually kind of thankful for the dub. I found myself preferring to watch it with the dubs on this one for some reason. I don't know why. Maybe because there's something a little bit amusing about the dubs, and like the when people watch this, if they watch the dub version, I don't think I've ever heard anybody pronounce vegetable the way they pronounced vegetable.
Yes, vegetable.
Yeah,
vegetable.
Because at first I was like, there's a little. We'll get into this. There's a little bit of like a really short love story.
Really.
Yeah.
Short.
And Lily Lee plays the woman, and in the dub she pronounces vegetable as vegetable. Like I can't even do it. It's a very
Vegetable.
Yeah. And at first I was like, is she drunk? She sounds like she's on an Ambien or something. Like it sounds like she's got a slur. And then I realized no, it's because she's pronouncing vegetable that way. And then the father also pronounces vegetable that way. And so I don't know what the reason is.
It reminded me of how I teach my little ones how to say that word, like my first and second graders. That's how we would teach them vegetable.
Okay.
And then, but normal people run it together.
Yeah,
I don't know
I just
why
say
it came
vegetable.
out that way.
And I was like, I don't think I've ever heard it said that way, but I thought maybe there's a country somewhere where it's said that way, or
maybe.
But I don't know. When Adam gets back on, maybe we'll ask if it's the Australian actor thing again. We can see if if it has anything to do with that. But yeah, I don't know. But I did like the dubs. They were silly at times, but I thought they kind of worked somehow for this movie. But speaking of the little love story, what did you guys think of that? I mean, it's really short. It might be so short, Kenny might not even know what I'm talking about.
No, I know exactly what you're talking about, but what was the point? I mean, I couldn't think of any reason why that was there.
I think the point that if it did serve a purpose, I think it was to show David Chang's character in the best possible light. That was the only thing I could sort of see, because it also maybe showed his character's ability to just kind of move on. I don't know. Because it's like you have this thing where like he meets this woman and she gives him like I think a piece of fabric or something, like a piece of blue fabric that belongs to her.
A handkerchief.
Yeah, it was a kerchief. And so she gives him this handkerchief, and presumably when he returns he's gonna marry her or continue with the romance. And when he comes back, she's presumably dead. It's not really resolved, really. Like the when he asks about her, he's just greeted with silence, and I don't know if it's silence because the guy is just assuming the worst, or if the worst has actually happened. But yeah, it's sort of an oddly placed love story, and it also is like they have like in the little bit of time that exists between those two characters, they have tremendous chemistry. Like you definitely feel like it should have gone somewhere, but it's like it's over in like 10 seconds.
Yeah, they could have moved that plot along a little bit in a different way. I mean, she was there to help them out, but I think they could have used a different character to help them out to get to the next, because I don't, like Kenny said, I don't understand why that was there. We have so many questions left after that we don't know really what the purpose was.
Well, it's almost like it's there to remind you that this isn't about love stories. Like, this isn't a movie that's about love. Like, you're sort of teased with a little bit of a love thread, and then it's just yanked out from under you. But yeah, I don't know. Every time I get to that part in the movie, I'm like a little bit frustrated because it feels like a lot of effort went into making it work, but it doesn't go anywhere. And so I just I don't know what I'm supposed to think about it.
Yeah, the first. Go ahead, Kenny.
I was going to say, the way I think about it is if they could have, trimmed half an hour from the movie, that would be one of the scenes they'd cut out. I mean, or rework. But
I guess the only thing I would say is it does really add sort of to the shading of the bad guys because of the whole thing with them trying to assault her in the middle of the night. And so if you take that scene out, I don't know if it affects. I mean, they do enough bad stuff over the course of the whole movie. Maybe it doesn't diminish that, but it might change my overall view of those two characters, because that's like probably the worst thing that they do. Well, it's one of the two worst things they do in the movie.
But the relationship between David Chang and Lily makes, for me anyway, it transitioned David Chang from being an arrogant youngest brother to a more likable person when he did come and kind of save her from the assault. So I guess it serves some kind of purpose.
Yeah, I mean, it kind of sets his character apart. Like, I feel like it, and that's like what I was saying. It kind of paints his character in the best possible light. Um, but yeah, I don't know. But I almost feel bad for Lily Lee because like she, you know, she's like doing a very compelling job, and then she's just gone. Um, but yeah, and she's also, is she the only woman in the film? Or do we I mean, we have the dancers, but I don't remember there being any other females.
She's the only female with a spoken line.
Okay.
She's the only important female.
Yeah, because the other
I guess
women are
you
the
could say.
dancers. I do have to say those dancers really impressed me. I was delighted by the dancing. Like the dancing was like very simple but very interesting. Sort of the moments that it where it kind of picked up energy all of a sudden. But
Yeah.
but yeah, she was the only. She was like the only female, and
But isn't that like a Chang Cheh thing? Is that all of his
Yeah.
movies tend to
Yeah.
have low?
But
That's
this
part of
is-
his masculinity.
but this is like especially like usually there's a woman who's got like some, you know, there's usually something more than this, and this is like it's just feels like she appears and like she's so, I don't know. I mean, number one, I like her in movies in general, but I felt like she was just really effectively creating a character, and then the character was gone. But yeah, it is a Chang Cheh thing. There is sort of like a I think it's called Yang Kang. It's like staunch masculinity, where his movies are really sort of about, because I think one of his, I think he was reacting to a lot of the movies before this period. The women were actually the heroes because a lot of the audience members were women, and so
We're women.
yeah. So I think he was reacting to that. I think he found that unrealistic, and so he went the other direction, of say like a King who like to have really strong female leads, and so yeah, I don't know, but it's a really it's a very puzzling love story because it's just kind of there and then gone. Um, but yeah, I don't know, any other things about the movie that you guys want to bring up before we get to the final parts of the discussion.
The last line that one of the brothers speaks at the end, 13 brothers, 13 heroes. I kind of disagree with that because I wouldn't see all 13 of them as heroes.
I would agree with you.
So here's where we might be slightly different because I watched the subtitled version and not the
Right.
dubbed version. So he was calling out the title of the movie, the 13 Generals or whatever. And I think it was more like an ironic cry of like, look at the 13 Generals, how great they were. Look at look at what they've become now. You know, what a great 13 Generals you are, type of thing.
Okay, so it's like
Okay.
an ironic comment on everything.
Yeah.
That makes considerably more sense than how it came
Yeah,
off
it
in the
does.
dub. I agree. Because yeah, in the dub, it definitely comes off differently. But yeah, so I don't know. Any other parting thoughts?
I've enjoyed the movie, but I didn't. I think it could have been reworked to be a bit less than 2 hours because, you know, sure, a lot of the stuff in the movie in its current form is necessary to, you know, show character motivations and you know, sow the seeds of dissent between the brothers and all that sort of stuff. But I feel like you could do the same thing in an hour and a half if you just tweak the script a bit.
It's definitely long. It's a long movie, and it's probably longer than it ought to be. It could and it's one of these films where I kind of you know, like usually we watch these movies a bunch of times before each podcast, and I only watched this twice because I did not want to watch it 3 times before Friday. It was just, you know, I 2 times was enough, and that was all to do with the length. If it was an hour and a half, I wouldn't have had that issue with it, because there's enough good plot beats in it that I would have been fine in an hour and a half getting to each of those plot beats and watching the fights, but there's enough sort of delayed moments in the film and enough segments in between that I felt like I only wanted to invest about 4 hours.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think some of the beginning could have been cut out for me. I understand that some of it was really important, like the fight with what was it, General Meng at the beginning, the one that I didn't like. If that had been sped up a little bit more, and then a lot of with the meeting that happened at the beginning could have been, I think, shortened.
Yeah.
I don't know. There are some things I felt that could have been left out, and the script could have been tweaked, and we still would have gotten the same effect. It was just too slow at the beginning for me. Too much unnecessary information, I guess.
And there was a lot going on in those scenes too. Like, yes. I feel he did something kind of similar in Marco Polo, and I thought it was much more effective. Where the opening sequence is kind of a similar. We're in the court. It was like a Mongol tent, but it was like we're in the court of the ruler or an important person, and we're getting all of these people introduced. But they had a sequence of fights,
right?
And it just really held my attention. Whereas here, I was kind of waiting for things to happen at the beginning. When things happened, I was entertained, but there was I found myself waiting at times. And also, like you said, there's just a lot. There's sort of you're being introduced to so many characters, and so many threads are being sort of established that it's kind of the beginning does feel a little bit overwhelming, I think. But yeah, so again, the name of the movie is The Heroic Ones. It's available on Amazon Prime, and it's 1970, so it's a sort of a early Shaw Brothers film, very much kind of a war movie, and it has a lot of the hallmarks of Chang Cheh style. So I think it's definitely worth seeing just to sort of get a sense of the themes and the style of filmmaking that he does. And I think it's a good movie, but I think all of us sort of share. I think we all had the same criticisms of it. It sounds like.
Yeah, it's a great foray into the Iron Triangle. It's not the best Iron Triangle film, but if you are interested in seeing the Iron Triangle, you definitely have to watch it.
Yeah, I mean, I enjoyed the movie, but like we've said, it doesn't feel like it's worth the 2 hours. Like, if it was half an hour shorter, I would enjoy it a lot more, I think. But otherwise, it's a great movie. While it's a bit of a train wreck in the sense that you can see it coming a mile off. How everything's gonna come to a head. It's still enjoyable to see the process, and the antagonists, the actors, did a very good job of portraying really easy to hate characters, and I enjoyed it, and I would recommend it. But if you have other things to watch, maybe watch those first.
And I think next week we'll be doing Blood Brothers, right? So we will be doing an Iron Triangle movie next week as well. And I think that one's probably higher up on people's lists in general of must-see Iron Triangles. So also, if you can and if you want, definitely check out our Wushu Weekend Patreon page and consider contributing. That will help us with movies and just basic expenses for keeping the podcast going. And the rest of this month, obviously, we're doing the Brotherhood theme, so we have a lot lined up, and then we'll probably announce some of the August stuff next week. So until then, we will talk to you later.